The first step when looking at the data is to figure out how we want to organize it and what's necessary. So if we sort it by date, then we can see that some of the data is messed up and it has 2 slashes. So in order to fix that, we need to go to Find and Replace, and we can replace the 2 slashes with 1 slash. Then we can resort the data, and I prefer to have it as the oldest date first and the newest date last. So after doing that, the first question asks about a revenue and release date. It's important to know that it was only looking for the 10 years after the first date, so that would be at the end of 2010. So then you can highlight that, create a pivot table in a new place, and find out the revenue per year. It's easier with the sum. And if you look at 2010, it ends up being the highest, and you can find that by conditional formatting. So that's the answer to one of the parts. The next part we're looking for is the trend. In order to find the trend, we need to take the sum from 2010 minus the sum from 2000 and then divide it by the sum from 2000, and that gives us 0.96 or 96%. So going back there, the revenue grew more than 50%. Now we need to find the year with the highest risk. So in order to do that, you need to find the maximum revenue from each year and then the minimum revenue from each year and figure out which had the largest gap. So by copying it and pasting it from outside of the pivot table, we can make it easier to solve. Then you just want to do equals and then the max minus the min, drag it down for each year. And with conditional formatting, it'll make it easy to see which year had the highest increase or decrease. And by looking at it, it was 2009. So that's the answer for the next part. For the next question, we're looking to identify the primary production companies with the highest overall revenue, and we need to include the number of movies, average cost, and average revenue. So then you want to go back to your data and create a new pivot table including the companies. Personally, I prefer to use the pivot tables because it just seems like the fastest and easiest way to get the data that we need. So right now we're just looking for the sum of all the companies, and then we can sort it outside of the pivot table to find which had the highest sum of revenue. To make it easier for ourselves, we can include multiple columns with all that we need to find. By having more columns, it'll make it way faster to figure out all that we need, and then we can just copy and paste it into the box with the answers. So after that's finished, we copy and paste it out, and then we go to Find and Sort, or Filter and Sort, and we sort it based on the sum of the revenue. And with that, we can see the top 5 are Walt Disney, Columbia, Paramount, Universal Pictures, and DreamWorks. So then we can put those in so we don't forget. And we just need the number of movies, the average, and the revenue. For the next question, we're just looking at how many production companies produced movies for all the years between 2016. So we just highlight all of the data and make another pivot table. This question is a little bit easier, so it gives us a nice break. But we don't want to include all of the companies more than once. So by doing the production companies and then the count of production companies, it'll make sure that there are no repeats, and you can find the count in the bottom right, which is 1,480. Next, we are only looking at Paramount, and we are trying to find the total revenue for each year in each region, but only 2014, 2015, and 2016. So we go back to the data, highlight all of it, and make another pivot table. But this time it's a little bit different, and we need to make sure that we're only looking at Paramount. So by going to the filters, we can choose the production company and choose Paramount. And then we filter it again for 2014, 2015, 2016. And with the regions on the left side, we can find all of the sums for each year. So with this data, we're looking for the sum for other, Asia, EU, and the US for each year. So then we can just add them all together. and drag it across. It's easier if you put the labels down below, so it's easier to calculate, and then we can just copy and paste it right into the answer sheet. At the end, this is what it should look like, and then we can just copy and paste it, but transpose it the other way so that it fits into our answer sheet. All that's left now is finding the country with the highest growth rate. So we can just take the sum from 2016, divided by the sum from 2014, and then minus 1. And just do that for all 3 or all 4. And we can easily see that Asia has the highest growth rate. Now we're going to be looking at how many of Paramount's Pictures movies over the last 3 years received a voter average higher than 7. So we're going to take another pivot table with a filter for only the production company of Paramount Pictures, and we're going to look at the row label, which is the ratings, and then a count of years. With the label filter, we can make it so it's only 7 or higher, or above 7, so starting with 7.1, we see that the total is 18. Then by removing the filter, we can see the total number of ratings overall, which is 158, and then you can do 18 divided by 158, which will give you the percentage. And that turns out to be around 11%. Now we're going to be looking for Paramount's 3 most profitable genres. So we're going to take the whole data and sort it based off of the company, and then we're going to make it so we can only see Paramount. After we do that, we're going to take it and paste it into a new sheet so that doesn't mess up our original data set. And when we're doing that, we're going to make 3 sections with the revenue, the budget, and the gross profit margin. To solve this, we're going to use the sum product function, and we're going to take all of the revenue and block that, and then take everything from the action column. And by doing this, it basically will multiply the revenue by the corresponding action, whether it's 1 or 0. So if it's 0, it'll be 0. If it's 1, it'll just stay as the revenue. And then the end of all of that, it will add them all together in order to give us the total revenue from that specific genre. After that, the same thing was done for the budget columns. And then in order to find the gross profit, we're going to take the revenue minus the budget and then divide it by the revenue. And then turn that into a percentage and take all 3 and drag them across for every genre. In the end, it should look something like this. And I just highlighted a few of the key profit margins that I saw were the highest. In order to make the data easier to see, I transposed it, and then I sorted it by gross profit margin. And here we can see that the documentary, horror, and science fiction genres are the highest for gross profit margin. The gross profit margin is useful because it tells us how much one of the genres made depending on how much their budget was. But we're looking for the total profit for each genre, so it may change. To get the profit, we just did the revenue minus the budget, and then I decided to sort it by the profit so we could figure out the top 3 genres. The top 3 genres ended up being adventure, action, and science fiction. The last question asks you to quantify and interpret the impact of budget in dollars has on the popularity of Paramount Pictures movies, including the whole time period. So some important things to include are that adventure, action, and science fiction had the highest revenue, and they also had the highest budgets. In turn, they also had very high gross profit margins of around 65 to 70%. But documentaries had the highest gross profit margin at around 84%, and horror movies at 78%, and they also had some of the lowest budgets. In turn, the revenues are also lower, around $170 million and $1.48 billion. But there was not as much they could do with the budget. So we can conclude that the budget does affect the popularity of the movies when looking at revenue as well, because revenue most of the time equals the popularity of a movie.